And I'm looking at the comments and I'm wondering if people understand why we've chosen this topic for today. Why is it relevant to talk about this in the context of what's going on in the world and particularly America right now?
Well, the irony is like just as recent as, well, first of all, last week when we talked about Inside America, spurned a little bit about Kimmel, which is in the entertainment sphere, but then the week before Charlie Kirk got assassinated. And I mean, clearly your head has to be in the sand not to realize that there are parallels between Germany in the 1930s versus USA in the 2020s. But ultimately, as recent as the late 2010s, you did have this specter of socialism rising in America, where you had a lot of the youth who were disenfranchised. This was a generation that had lived through 9/11, the Iraq War, the Afghanistan War, where either they suffered injuries. I mean, if they died, they wouldn't be around anymore, or they saw, friends and classmates go to war. Then the Great Recession, and then, fast forward to just inflation and, rising cost of housing. The pandemic and everything else that we've seen has kind of like exacerbated the haves from the have-nots. And so, yeah, like 6-7 years ago when I produced the documentary Fox and the Hen House, it was a little bit just looking at why are the youth of America, who are in this capitalist system that all these foreigners are still flocking to. It's like the joke was when the Berlin Wall fell, nobody from the West rushed over to the East. It was people from the East who were like going to the West, leaving socialism to go to capitalism, so to speak. So, but it's like, if you think about it now, it's not like socialism in theory is the threat. People are now worried about fascism. So there is like kind of like younger generations, I feel, as they get older, like they do care. Obviously, they care about entertainment and escapism. But as we've seen when we cover these topics, there is a growing interest to make sense of, and Elon Musk, the wealthiest fella in the world, there is this growing interest in, the political and economic system and how it affects them. And it's kind of also normal for WatchMojo. Like when we started 20 years ago, we had a very young fan base. There was a lot of younger viewers who were very early adopters of YouTube. But if you start watching WatchMojo at 15 years ago and you're 30, yeah, you care about the new Marvel movie, but you also care about the fact that you can't buy a home, and you got, riots going on in cities after Black Lives Matters. And then you got now people every night marching on the streets, chanting Palestine, free Palestine or whatever. So it's like, hey, how does this affect me? Which frankly, it affects you a lot more than whether Marvel decides to bring back the Mandalorian or not,
Yeah, definitely. How long ago was it that we released that Fox and the Hen House documentary?
I want to say 2018 or 2019. So
okay,
like
so
6, 7
about
years.
7 years. And it seems like a lot has changed in America since that time. What kind of changes have you witnessed taking place?
I think the biggest one that I've seen is what I just alluded to, is the demographic, right? I think like it's true. Like it's easy to criticize the youth and younger generations and say they don't know this or that. But historically, the idea was like, go to school, get an education, come out, get a job, get married, buy a house, have kids, work, die. Not necessarily the best future. But that, I mean, you could call it social contract or not, that kind of expectation is no longer realistic. And then now you also have the rise of AI, you have the rise of automation. We've already gone through many cycles of offshoring and reshoring and outsourcing and resourcing or whatever. So the reality is that if you are a young American, you are pissed off legitimately, because everything costs a lot more. Even internally, when we discuss like annual reviews and salaries, I always tell my team, I'm like, guys, I go grocery shopping. I remember bacon, a pack was $3. Now it's like you get half the size of the bacon and you pay 3 times the price, right? And so because we're a small company, I'm like, well, yeah, you don't want to lose your people. But frankly, a lot of corporations, they went through a period in the first 25 years of the 21st century where they overhired because of low interest rates, the zero interest rate phenomenon period, ZIRP. They just extended. They wanted to grow. They hired. They were like, sure, if you want to do social, you want to discuss social, political things at work, no problem, because we need as many bodies as we need. oh, there's a pandemic, you want to work from home, no problem, we'll accommodate you. But I think a lot of corporations see that they have probably way too many employees, they need less. AI and automation is going to make that even go lower. So I do think that like the younger generation is facing a tremendous amount of adversity. But also, if you were born in 1900, by your 14th birthday, there was the First World War. When you turned 39, there was a Second World War. In between that, you underwent a Great Depression, right? So every generation goes through crap, but people are generally very, their perspective is just how it affects them. So I think there are, like, I get more and more young people asking me about these things, about like, what does the future look like for me if I can't find a job? Or I thought I had a job, but they just ghosted me. And, there's like an AI system that is supposedly reviewing my resume. I didn't hear back. And there are no easy answers, right? And so, not to be dystopian, but the future is both super bright because of technology. And I mean, you hear people say you might live till 150 now. At the beginning of the 20th century, people lived to 30, 35, 40. Mm-hmm. The number of times you hear, oh, my grandfather passed away at 36 of a stroke, or he died at 40 of God knows what. It's not just Japan anymore. So there is this kind of like disparity, divergence between how long people are going to live and the clarity and certainty around, will I have a job? Will I be able to pay my bills? Can I buy a house? So I just think that everywhere, these themes are more top of mind.
Yeah, I think it's the uncertainty is the biggest thing. It's not knowing what the future is going to look like, and it's driven mostly by technology. But within this capitalist system, and US has been kind of like the poster child of capitalism on the global stage for a long time. Let's just go back a little bit and see how it's worked out over the years. What's the history been like to lead us up to the point where we're at?
Well, again, I don't think anybody could be called the founder of capitalism, but Adam Smith and John Maynard Keynes were two, theorists who are credited with the systems that we now live in, right? So Adam Smith in 1776 wrote Wealth of Nations, and he is widely seen as like the first person who kind of codified this system that we call capitalism. And so he talked about this invisible hand. And so he was like a big believer in laissez-faire economics, which basically is a French term for leave it alone. And he felt that the market's invisible hand would automagically correct inefficiencies, and basically demand and supply would rectify any unhealthy inequality in society. A simple thing is, if everybody studies to be a computer programmer because they think, ooh, high salaries, all these big tech firms are hiring, but then now it's like AI means you don't need to program, or you need less, for example. Whether that's true or not is not the point. Well, then a lot of younger graduates are just going to automatically shift and go into trades and become electricians and plumbers, because if I have a broken pipe, it might take me a week to get somebody to come see it. But if I want to hire a coder, you could find anybody who codes, right? So over time, demand and supply for different goods, but also services and skills, will raise the salary levels or decrease demand, and ergo decrease salaries. And this invisible hand is going to take care of it. And to be honest, in theory, it makes a ton of sense, because it's really just graphing demand and supply graphs. And if you move one, what happens to price? It's kind of common sense.
Mm-hmm.
I think where that fails in reality, or is more limiting in practice, is it doesn't really take into account human psychology. And again, I always allude to the sins and virtues, but things like greed, ultimately. So John Maynard Keynes came along a bit later on, and he was like, wait, no. In the long run, we're all dead anyway. So this invisible hand is theory. You do need Keynesian economics. You do need to inject some government intervention in whatever economic policies you have. Now, most systems in the capitalist world, like to your question, is Canada a socialist country? No, it is not. But absolutely, Canada is a lot more Keynesian in that sense, where they're like, well, we don't want to just hand off health to a bunch of for-profit corporations. we still want the government to oversee health or education, right? So Keynesian economics is a lot more representative today than the purest form of capitalism that Adam Smith opined about with the invisible hand. America is a bit more capitalist in the Adam Smith sense. But where there is a bit of a disconnect over the 200 plus years is that, yes, you do see how human behavior left unchecked leads to bad things, so to speak.